This is the hook that killed 84 people.
The Pacific Gas and Electric Company pleaded guilty to starting the campfire and to killing 84 people the day the town of Paradise burned down. Behind the scenes, prosecutors dealt with unusual obstacles at every turn.
Literally, we're letting the murderer into the crime scene and telling them to collect our evidence for us.
Not only did PG&E get to participate in its own criminal investigation, the state agency that regulates power companies refused to cooperate.
Do you run into that kind of thing with any state agency prosecuting crimes?
Usually not, no.
That state agency's giving misleading answers, but now the person who ran it is ready to tell all.
What would you say to the people of Paradise?
That I'm sorry and I'm sad. I don't think we held PG&E accountable, and I know we made the wrong decision.
It's hard to really grasp the magnitude of human suffering caused by the campfire.
We need help out of here. We are stuck. We need help out of here. We have caught on fire.
This is what tens of thousands of people woke up to. The first thing they did that day was run for their lives.
Are we gonna make it alive to Chico?
The windstorm blotted out the sun, turning day to night. Hot embers fell on nearly every home and business, lighting them on fire. The roads out of Paradise jammed up.
Let's go! Get out of your cars! Let's go!
Some people died in their cars trying to run. Even more didn't make it that far. Most of the dead were found inside their homes.
No, we can't get out of here. I'm sorry.
Masses of people survived by riding out the firestorm, huddled together in big parking lots. Rescuers helped tens of thousands of people make it out alive.
Look at the clear sky!
Hey, clear sky, guys!
Thousands of survivors live with trauma today. Many still carry survivor's guilt, wondering why they lived, but 85 of their friends and neighbors didn't. The campfire sparked further up these very power lines on a gusty day, a lot like this one. Ever since I was in that fire, I've worked to understand it. It wasn't an accident. It was a crime. The people who died in Paradise weren't just disaster victims. They were victims of their power company, the one that owns these lines, PG&E. Almost 2 years after sparking the fire, PG&E had its day in court.
Concerning the death of Bernice Schmidt, guilty, Your Honor. The death of Julian Binstock, guilty, Your Honor. The death of Dennis Hanco, Anna Hastings, Jennifer Hayes, guilty, Your Honor.
The Pacific Gas and Electric Company pleaded guilty to the biggest corporate homicide in U.S. history. 84 counts of felony manslaughter and one more felony for illegally sparking the fire.
This is the hook that killed 84 people.
That groove took about 98 years to wear in. It's not a defect. These hooks are what are holding the electrical lines off the ground. And PG&E's decision was simply just to let these things hang until they broke.
When this old hook did break, the power line made contact with the metal tower, showering the ground in sparks. That's how PG&E started the campfire.
They didn't want to spend the money to actually inspect these things. They didn't want to spend the money to actually replace these things. They're ignoring the safety of people to maximize their profits.
It was motivated for money. They killed my father for money.
Philip Binstock's father, Julian, lived in a retirement home near Paradise.
My father was found in a bathtub.
When you contemplate dying, burning to death is your last choice. And the families have that image in their minds of their loved ones' last moments on this earth.
You or I would get 90 years in prison for committing PG&E's crimes, but corporations can't go to prison.
The penal system needs to be changed. A $10,000 fine, that's what my father's worth.
From the bills people pay, PG&E earns about $17 billion in annual revenue. That breaks down to about $2 million an hour, every hour, 365 days a year. For perpetrating the biggest corporate manslaughter in U.S. history, PG&E paid a criminal fine of just $3.5 million. It was the maximum punishment. California law charges corporate criminals the same fines as people. A penalty so small, PG&E made that money back in less time than it took to chauffeur these executives back to San Francisco. Prosecutors knew the punishment would be small, but they still wanted to make sure all of us understood what PG&E did.
You are a killer corporation. Do you understand that?
They revealed something shocking. That instead of helping the criminal investigation, our state government got in the way.
Did it hold the case back?
We believe it did.
Specifically, the prosecutors told us PG&E's state government regulators, the California Public Utilities Commission, refused to help. The PUC had reams of evidence showing how PG&E's maintenance work was reckless and negligent, but the agency wouldn't share it.
There was a lot of stuff that I wish we'd have had months earlier.
Do you run into that kind of thing with any state agency prosecuting crimes?
Usually not, no. Why can't we work together?
We wanted to ask the PUC's leader why, but she wouldn't grant us an interview. Neither would the governor who appointed her. But the person who ran that agency day to day
2.5 years.
did talk. She didn't have a lot to lose at this point. Executive Director Alice Stebbins let us film her cleaning out her desk.
Friday will be my last day.
Why is that?
Because I whistle blew on the PUC where I work.
The PUC is where PG&E gets its state license to legally do business as a monopoly. Alice ran the agency during the campfire and the investigation.
If I'm negligent, driving my car drunk, and I kill someone, eventually, if I do that enough, at some point I'm going to lose my privilege to drive. I'm going to lose my license. How is PG&E any different?
They shouldn't be any different. But they're a very big and powerful business in California. And they seem to be able to get away with a lot.
Still ahead,
She's the first person in all of this I've heard say she was sorry.
our whistleblower explains how the state let PG&E off the hook and then disguised it as a penalty.
So is this just a bunch of window dressing?
Yeah.
When we asked the Public Utilities Commission to justify why it wouldn't help the criminal investigation of PG&E, the agency misled us. A spokesperson pointed us to a law restricting the sharing of information with the general public, which isn't the same thing as sharing with law enforcement. The agency also said it wanted to protect the integrity of its own separate investigation.
Item number 34 is Commissioner Rexhaven's item.
Our investigation found that PG&E's misconduct caused 15 of the wildfires.
PG&E broke dozens of safety rules. It was more than just the campfire and the 98-year-old hook that started it. PG&E also caused deadly fires the year before, mostly by breaking rules that require trees to be cut back from power lines so they don't spark fires in windstorms.
Over 100 people killed, 25,000 structures destroyed.
The commission decided PG&E deserved a fine 50 times bigger than the one it paid in criminal court, $200 million.
The fine is clearly appropriate here.
But what PG&E deserved isn't what PG&E got.
It's just amazing to me And I was there the day that they made that decision.
PG&E argued the fine was too big. PG&E declared bankruptcy to force its wildfire victims to negotiate a settlement. The company even tried to make those victims pay the PUC's fine.
I rejected PG&E's proposal to pay the fine out of the victim's trust.
Instead of telling PG&E tough luck, the commission decided this.
I recommended that the payment of the fine be permanently suspended.
The California Public Utilities Commission wrote PG&E a $200 million ticket and voted to rip the ticket up.
Aye.
President Badger? Aye. The vote for item number 34 is unanimous.
That's the decision. I want to express my deep appreciation for the outstanding work of our Safety and Enforcement Division here.
It was my honor to participate.
I'm sorry. It was not okay to do that. I mean, PG&E, how many passes can we give them? San Bruno? Paradise? I mean, it's not okay.
There wasn't a principled basis for saying, oh, let's just make them not pay the $200 billion.
Law professor Catherine Sandoval used to be a PUC commissioner.
I would not have voted that way.
She explained Governor Gavin Newsom's pen provided the rationale. He signed AB 1054, a law that bailed PG&E out with a multi-billion-dollar wildfire fund. Not to fix PG&E's power grid, but to fund damages PG&E would have to pay if it sparks more fires, a way of convincing Wall Street that this bankruptcy plan would work. The law came with a deadline. To tap into the new fund, PG&E had to exit bankruptcy by the end of June 2020.
So that's the pressure tactic that bankruptcy created. But it's not really an excuse for why they shouldn't have to pay that much of a fine, right? Because, again, there were massive, multiple violations, and these violations killed people. Part of the purpose of these penalties is to deter this conduct. Have you really deterred this conduct?
As executive director, Alice Stebbins didn't get a vote on PG&E's punishment. She carried out what the 5 commissioners decided.
What would you say to the people of Paradise?
That I'm sorry and I'm sad. I don't think we held PG&E accountable. And I know we made the wrong decision.
She's the first person in all of this I've heard say she was sorry and she did something wrong.
Depending on whose reporting you read that day, you might have seen headlines about the commissioners waiving that big fine, or you might have seen something that looked exactly the opposite. A record-setting penalty, almost $2 billion. Headlines echoing the PUC's own press release. But when we handed that press release to Alice Stebbins, it only took her a few seconds to change her mind about whether it told the truth.
The bulk of this, almost $1.8 billion, is disallowances of wildfire expenditures. Now, they can't argue it was a prudently caused wildfire, can they?
No.
So it was never really allowable to begin with, right?
Correct.
So is this just a bunch of window dressing?
Yeah. I mean, the media for the PUC is really good. They know how to write.
So almost the entirety of what's the biggest penalty ever was something they weren't really allowed to charge customers for anyway.
Yes.
That $1.8 billion dressed up as a penalty required PG&E to pay its own expenses for the wildfires it caused. It's a lot like punishing a drunk driver who killed people by making them pay to fix their own car. PG&E also paid a much smaller amount aimed at fire prevention.
They're now having to go spend a bunch of money fixing the power grid that a federal judge said they should have been spending over the decades anyway.
That's correct.
And this isn't going to cover the whole thing, is it? $2 billion?
No. No.
This story is about more than old equipment or untrimmed trees. Former Commissioner Catherine Sandoval told us PG&E's criminality runs deeper.
And when you look at their repeated failures, it's not about a hook.
Instead, she says, it's about why PG&E didn't find the hook and replace it.
They're hiding problems.
From themselves and others.
Yes.
PG&E admits it doesn't have records to show how old the hook was, and PG&E keeps resisting plans that would force it to improve that kind of information.
This is why I have come to believe and be very concerned that they continue to engage in criminal thinking. It's just a matter of time before something else happens.
Arson investigators think something else did happen. Only a few months after PG&E pleaded guilty, yet another deadly fire sparked near their lines.
I lost everything in 45 minutes.
When we come back, PG&E is under a homicide investigation again. After PG&E admitted to killing 84 people by illegally sparking the campfire, it only took a few months before we'd be asking if PG&E killed again.
4 people were killed in Shasta County.
The Zog Fire took the lives of 4 people.
The flames of that fire raced toward the home where the McLeod family lives.
I lost everything in 45 minutes. My entire life was wiped out.
Zach McLeod was on a grocery run. His wife Elena and their 8-year-old daughter Fela had to run for their lives. They got out of the house, racing down the hill in a pickup truck. This pickup truck.
Put yourself in their shoes. Trying to drive out of an area that's on fire with the winds that sound like a freight train, black smoke everywhere, and my daughter just must have been so scared. And my wife must have been so scared, and they didn't make it off the road.
Mother and child, along with 2 other people in the small community of Igo, died in the flames. As their families started to grieve, they got another shock.
My mom was in tears, and what happened now? I couldn't imagine anything being worse than this. And she told me that PG&E's equipment had been seized.
CAL FIRE investigators seized parts of this PG&E power line where the Zog Fire started.
And certainly homicide is a potential given that 4 individuals have died.
The Zog Fire became a criminal investigation with only one suspect named PG&E.
They were supposed to be shutting off the power due to high winds.
But PG&E didn't shut it off. Why is PG&E still in charge of these life and death decisions? Governor Gavin Newsom wouldn't give us an interview, but we still managed to get a question to him.
I want to briefly shift topics to PG&E. With PG&E,
it's always the last question.
Outside the courthouse, PG&E's leaders promised change. Are you convinced personally that PG&E can in fact make this shift and start putting safety above profit?
I absolutely am. I absolutely am. There's no
And
question
it will
in my
happen?
mind. And it will happen.
We won't see you back at one of these?
No, sir.
PG&E is back under investigation as homicide detectives try to prove the company killed 4 people in the Zog Fire.
There's so many more special moments that we had been denied.
Now, Zach can't help but wonder, would his wife and child still be alive today if someone at PG&E had just flipped a switch? Governor Gavin Newsom's office declined or ignored every interview request we sent over the last 2 years.
PG&E was convicted of 6 federal felonies in 2016. After that, You took more than $200,000 to help get elected. How should people trust you to be running the show to come up with the solutions?
I wish you luck with whatever you're working on, but that's a strange question.
Today, he's even less accessible.
And I want to briefly shift topics to PG&E. With PG&E,
It's always the last question. It's a truism.
I don't want to break tradition.
Yeah.
We submitted a written question to the one reporter allowed at this event in San Jose.
So with PG&E under a homicide investigation, suspected of causing last month's Zog Fire and killing 4 people in Shasta County, why should PG&E be allowed to continue making life and death decisions about when and where to shut off the power?
They have substantially improved upon their previous efforts, but they're not even near where we expect they will be in a number of years. And they have a lot of work to do to restore not just your power, but to restore the trust that they have failed to earn over the course of decades.
Newsom went on a couple minutes. His answer never acknowledged the people who died or the criminal investigation, but he did talk about his role leading negotiations to get PG&E out of bankruptcy and back to making a profit. He didn't take follow-ups, but if he had, we would have asked this.
How is that not like giving somebody who's repeatedly crashed and drunk driving the keys to a car?
Right. Well, I think, again, we have to prove the difference.
Newsom promised a reimagined PG&E, but the experts we interviewed just don't see PG&E making changes to how it behaves.
They're in the process of replacing their CEO, and they've replaced most of their board members, and they've restructured nothing. You know, it's like, okay, we redid the paint job on the Boeing Max.
Unlike an airplane with safety problems, we can't ground PG&E's machine. We need it too much.
It's not enough just to fix who's ever at the top of this machine. If you don't fix the machine, you can't fix the problem.
The governor may think PG&E is improving, but his fire chief isn't as sold.
My fear is that the progress that's being made is still not fast enough to really, truly protect the public. I don't want to see another campfire.